Jardian, welcome, my man. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's been a while since I've seen your face,
Yeah,
so this is all fun and games. But I'm excited to be here with you.
it's been too long. I miss seeing you in person, and I'm so excited to talk to you today. So you're one of my favorite people down under. You're from the land of Oz, um, and I want to get to know you on a deeper level. But first of all, I mean, why don't you tell me, Jardian, like how did you end up where you're at today?
Yeah, let's get straight into it then. I guess the right place to start, Joey, for me on that one would probably be to go back to, I guess, my parents because it really starts with them and what they were doing. And their story kind of begins. I was born and raised in Australia, but my parents are both from New Zealand, from the very green parts of New Zealand, might I add. The Not so much the city areas, but mostly around the green rolling mountains that I think people are probably more familiar with from Lord of the Rings and those types
Yeah,
of places. Those
beautiful.
are the parts of New Zealand, yeah, that my folks were from. But a couple of years before they decided to have children, they felt like they needed to move over to Australia. And so they arrived on Australia a couple of years before I was born. And I'm the eldest child in my family. I'm there first. And so um, I have essentially been born and raised in Australian goodness, so to speak. I would definitely consider myself Australian with a very proud Māori heritage from New Zealand. And so when they moved over here, they decided to come to Sydney, which was probably uh, paved for them by other people from their family who had come over as well. So my story begins in Sydney because of them, and everything that I've been able to do in my career has mostly been based out of things that have happened in and around this general precinct that we have here. And so that's how I came to be where I am in terms of location. And in terms of, career and all the other stuff that I'm sure we're going to get into, it's probably just one step at a time, which we can cover off as we go through all this stuff.
Sure, cool. New Zealand is so beautiful. I remember that was one of our favorite family vacations when we lived in
Oh
Sydney.
yeah.
We went over to both islands. We took a camper van from Queenstown up to Auckland. And why are those islands so different? The South and the North are so different.
They really are. We're waiting for the day that they they make it easier to just kind of even easier than it already is to hop between islands. I mean, it's not terrible.
Yeah.
It's not overly arduous, but we're waiting for that time where you can almost just scoot over super quickly. And they are super different. But I would imagine that that is very similar to what you're used to in the States, where it's
Yeah,
almost like certain states are almost their own individual countries in some
right.
regards.
For
They
sure.
look different, they feel different. But certainly for anyone who has never been before, if you're into that like extreme sports scene, that South Island might be for you. And if you're kind of into the other stuff, a little bit more theater stuff, then maybe it's the North Island. But you're right, it is different. But like so many other places, each with their own perks
Absolutely.
and quirks.
So your family's from the North Island, the
They are.
southern part of the North Island. Okay. Yeah.
They are.
So cool. We love both islands, but particularly near that, Hamilton and that Hobbiton area. We went and saw the Lord of the Rings show and like just the roll,
Yep.
like you explained it, rolling green hills, like you look like you're in the Shire. It was
Oh, that's totally it. And that is Hamilton is actually where my dad is from. That's where the Ormsby family it was based in New Zealand. There's a few there still. But that's where a lot of our story begins. And you're right, as you kind of drive through and around Hamilton, it really does feel like you're taking a step into a greener place,
Mhm.
a little bit untouched by infrastructure
Yeah,
and things like that. So definitely worth a visit for those who haven't been there before.
for sure. And the sheep to human ratio is like 6 to 1, right?
It's pretty high. It's pretty high. I don't think it's as high as Australia, but it is pretty high.
That's awesome. Well, tell me, Jardine, what's a childhood memory or tradition that still influences you today?
You know what? I don't know if what you were looking or what you're thinking of here, Joey, is like something maybe deep and meaningful in that space, but something that I used to do a lot, and I was thinking about this just last night because we still do this with my kids, is that one thing I used to do with my dad a fair bit, we weren't a very big television family
Hmm.
at all. There were very few things that we would sit down together. Just for context, I'm one of five children, the eldest of five children. And so we had a lot of things going on, and there were different things that we were doing in our lives. So television didn't really have, front and center shotgun on our schedules. But the one thing that I do remember a lot was being there for season one, the very, very, very first season of Survivor, which is kind of where proper reality television maybe began. And so
Okay.
I remember it was actually my dad who was watching an episode of it first, and he was kind of all the way into it, and then eventually I kind of found my way over there, and it almost became a thing that we would do, he
Hmm.
and I, and that eventually expanded out to more and more people in the family. And there have probably definitely been some things that I've learned about life and about relationships with people that were taught to me by that show. But I just remember how excited he was to have something that he could watch and digest in so many different ways.
Hmm.
And just all the different personality types that you get on there.
Right.
That is something that actually still happens today in our household. Now we have our own version of it. We have Australian survivors. So it's almost been localized to the Australian quirks and lingos here. But those early years of, watching the very first alliances form and just watching human psychology play out a little bit,
Hmm.
certainly like a really fun memory and a fun memory that I have of when I was younger. And that's something that, we still do as a family today. In fact, on her way out to school this morning, my daughter asked me how far ahead of them we were, just so that she knew how much she had to catch up for. And I don't know what it is, whether it's the challenges and the games. I think for our kids, they're more
Yeah.
interested in those types of things. For me, I'm probably more interested in the interhuman relationships and things that happen there. But that's a memory that we quite like and have still allowed to influence our schedules today.
That's awesome. Did you apply to go on there?
I didn't apply to go on there, but I had people from the studio reach out
Yeah.
to me, but it wasn't actually for that show. It was for a
Okay.
different show that
Okay.
they were doing. And I think that kind of came about not because I applied for anything. Certainly, I'm probably at a point in life now where I might not not do those challenges as well as I might have when I was in the phase of really wanting to go on there. But it was for a different show, and I think it really came about because having been exposed to television through work and seeing a whole bunch of different things, there were some editing techniques, so to speak, that
Hmm.
I could see were happening there, and I would occasionally comment on the official like social media pages of those
Hmm.
things. And I think what happened was probably there was someone there, like an editor or something, saying, "Oh, well, this person kind of semi seems to know what's going on here. Maybe we should just talk to them
Yeah.
about going on there." So it wasn't for that particular show. If it had been, maybe I would have responded a lot
Yeah.
faster to it. But you know what? Once upon a time, that was definitely something I really, really wanted to do, was to
That's
get
awesome.
on there and to be part of that show.
You would get along well with my wife's sister Simone and my friend Trent. They both have submitted, videos to
Really?
go on. Yeah, multiple times. So
Wow.
anyway,
Wow. I think it's just a matter of time too, those things like that it'll happen. I'm excited to hear when they actually do get cast to go on.
okay.
You have to fill me in on it.
I feel like we could do some Survivor with we've actually got I don't know how many years we've had this church ball fantasy group. So we've got fantasy basketball, but there's a little bit of Survivor involved with that. We've had it for how many years? I joined what, 10 years ago? And
Yeah, 10 years ago, the league itself is going into, I mean, this is year 18 of the
wow.
league. Like, it's almost been there longer than I half my life. So, it's going on. It's still kicking on. Same with like the football league. It's getting up there
Yeah.
in years too. And there definitely is a bit of that. Like, I think through those first few years, it was probably predominantly just a little bit of updating. But as WhatsApp kind of became immersed into messaging culture, and
Mhm.
and the league kind of evolved with that. Yeah, it can get pretty spicy with some pretty
Oh yeah.
with some pretty fun takes
We could
at
probably
times.
make an entire podcast out of some of those side conversations we've had and maneuvered and choreographed.
No, 100%. And like I think the thing about that particular league that we joke about, I often joke about it sometimes occasionally being a little bit too much, but I definitely hear from people that are in it. Like we started off with just eight
Hmm.
people that were in the league 18 years ago, and slowly but surely we've kind of added in, and some people have, faded out, but other people like yourself as an example have come in. And I think one of the things that's been super helpful with that group is that it stands as a little bit of um, a support crew at times when people are going
Sure.
through, a few things in their lives because we banter a lot
Oh yeah.
within that group. But I think it is one of those kind of fun relationships where we do that. But if someone in the group is having a hard time with something, that's kind of the real core value of that group. It's less about the basketball and more about, I think we've gotten to it to the point where it's more about the camaraderie
Yeah.
and the brotherhood that exists within that, which is
Yeah.
something that I find super helpful on the hard days and super supportive for others. I've had others in the league say to me, man, that really helped me. That group of dudes really helped me
Yeah.
get through some pretty hard stuff, which I love as part of our story.
100%. And I really appreciate the friendships we have within that group. Again, like you said, it's pure 95% of the time it's banter, but there's been some times where like some of the guys and myself included, like we need those like pick me ups or like, all right,
Mm.
let's circle back, like what's really important here in life. And I've appreciated that. So I appreciate you for introducing me.
Yeah, and appreciate you for being there despite the tough loss this week.
I know. I lost by one rebound for the record. Anyway, I'm not stressed. I'm a champion. My spot in there is cemented, but it is a bit of a bummer.
Nailed on. You've had a couple of those too, actually. You've
Yeah,
had a
one to
couple of
you,
tough exits.
two to you. Two, yeah, multiple. But again, I think you're the you're the Michael Jordan of our league. So,
Uh, I feel a little bit more like LeBron. I'm sorry to LeBron fans, but that was intended as a slight. But
oh yeah,
yeah, I think there are others coming up behind me in the league
we'll
now. So
we'll have to text that. There's an ongoing LeBron MJ debate, right?
there is. It never ends.
All right. So we've known each other now for going on almost a decade. Um, what's in that time too, there's been so many ups and downs from the group of us, but for you, what's something that's been super challenging, but then it ended up being super rewarding? And you look back and you're just grateful you went through that.
You know what? When I think about that, Joey, I think about different experiences where, it felt like the bottom was falling out of work, the bottom was falling out of life, and there's been a lot of different moments where there have been some really challenging things that have happened. For those who don't know, I work in a tech space or specifically in a product space where I lead a team of designers and engineers and business analysts who work uh, on KO binge, as we call it down here, Flash Fox Sports. It would probably be the Australian equivalent of maybe something like a Hulu, for those who are stateside
Yeah.
there. So I lead that team there and take care of all the streaming side of all that. So there's been a few challenges there, but one of the things that I will never ever forget was actually in a role that I had prior to that, where I was the doing product as well, but at Basketball Australia. Now, Basketball Australia is the governing body of basketball down here in Australia. So they were responsible for the upkeep of all of the professional competitions that they have here, the NBL, WNBL. It's not like that anymore. That league has kind of evolved into different things, but at that time, they were responsible for it. But separate to that, they were also responsible for all of the Olympic teams and the Paralympic teams. And so as often as there was a big event that would happen, I found myself as the product person and as the digital person, doing a little bit of a round trip with whoever was going around at the time. And I'll never forget one experience where um, I think a challenge that we have if you're on the media side of a sports organization is that when it comes time to interview players or arrange for players to interview for you with a news publication, it can be really touch and go with how they respond to that. It can be really, if you've had a good win, people might be a little bit more willing and a little bit more chipper in their responses to people. But if it's been a tough loss, then media is kind of the last thing that athletes want to do. And so I remember a time when I was with the Australian Boomers. So we're talking about the Australian Olympic basketball team here. And we were in training camp for a World Cup that was happening. This is quite a few years ago now. This is maybe 10 years ago for a World Cup that was happening in Spain. Dante Exum had just been drafted by the Utah Jazz at the time. And so we're at training camp, and I remember I was sitting down just eating breakfast, and one of the assistant coaches, who was Luke Longley, famously known for his time spent at the Chicago Bulls, carrying Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen to their their last three titles,
Still
even though he
plays
got
there
no
for me.
start in the Last Dance. Um, he actually came over to me during breakfast one time, and we were really early in camp, and it hadn't really gotten underway, but he could see how I was actually going to be with them for the next 5, 6 weeks straight,
Mhm.
because the tournament itself only went for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. But in order to prepare for that tournament, the teams would often, go and do a little bit of a warm-up set of matches
Yeah.
through Europe or through somewhere else, right? And so we're in Canberra, we're at the Australian Institute of Sport. I'm sitting down at the table eating my breakfast. And Luke Longley comes over and sits right, plonks himself right down next to me. And, Luke Longley is this big, hulking, enormous, red-headed Australian who's about as pure Australian as you can get with all of his mannerisms. And he sits next to me, and he gave me a piece of advice that I've never forgotten, and I've never, and it's been super helpful for me, not just in that role, but in other roles, when he said to me, if you want the players to do what you need them to do, then you need to find ways, Jardian, to contribute to what the players need beyond your own job description. And so I kind of understood what that meant, right? Like I felt like the assignment was essentially to make sure that I was immersing myself in that culture. And so we went to training that afternoon, that night. And because he had said this, because he had told me that I needed to find ways to add value to the playing group beyond my own job description. At the end of training, every single player would kind of throw their gear into the middle of the court, and all of the people who were at training camp for the first time, whether you were a player or something else, you were kind of considered like these rookies, right? And so it was the rookie responsibility to go and pick up the laundry. In the past, media people hadn't really done that, but because of those conversations that I'd had with Luke, just like a couple of the other actual playing rookies who were there, I went to the middle of the court, grabbed that bag of laundry, and took it back and washed the clothes. When there were players who, during training, or after training more specifically, who wanted to just stay back and get more shots up, I could have easily packed up my camera gear and just started rolling into the editing process. But because of that feedback, I would often just stick around and just get rebounds for people who wanted to get up like a couple of extra shots. I'll never forget the experience I had in Spain with Chris Golding, who's a very very good professional player. He's still playing here in Australia now. He's known for his shooting, and part of the reason that he's so good at that shooting is because he commits himself to all that extra time
Mhm.
in the gym after practice. And I had the opportunity on a few different occasions to just be there, be around, and I would just get rebounds for him while he got up his extra 200, 300 shots after practice. And I think what that did for me in that particular experience is that no matter what I asked the players after that, no matter what I asked them to do, whether it was media, whether it was talk to someone over the phone, we were in Spain, and all the local media was basically operating on a different time zone to
Mhm.
us. So sometimes our players would have to stay up to really late hours to do these interviews. But because of that, those extras that I would call it, beyond my own just job description, I never found any player had any issue with wanting to help me out on those things. And so one of the things that I've learned that has been, a rewarding experience from me from that one breakfast conversation with Luke Longley was that if we find ways to contribute beyond the remit
Mhm.
that we have to do something, whether it's our job description or anything else, as long as we're not stepping on people's toes in ways that make them feel that we're trying to take over, um, people respond really favorably to that. And it's been a lesson that I'm glad I experienced it. And I still have relationships with these players that were in that squad
Yeah.
that time. And, a big part of that is because of that. So even now, when I'm not talking about my work life, if I'm talking about other elements of life, whether it's at home or somewhere else, if there's something that can be done beyond my own remit or the expectations that people have of me in those settings, then it usually ends up being helpful for me down
Yeah,
the line.
that is valuable advice. I love that. Who's your favorite basketball player on that Boomers team?
You know what? I At the end of that camp, every single player got sorry, every single person that was on that traveling team got a jersey from one of the players. And the jersey that I got was from a person from Queensland named Brock Modem. Not a particularly big household name in the
Yeah,
States, perhaps, but he's currently playing in Japan. And he and I, because of Australian culture and Australian sports, because he was from Queensland and I was from New South Wales, it wasn't uncommon for us to talk about rugby league a lot, especially state of origin. And because
sure.
we were on opposite sides of the origin spectrum, we would often banter with each other as people tend to do between, the Maroons and the Blues. And so we did that, and he actually ended up being someone that I really enjoyed spending time with. We would have a couple of conversations there, and that was really fun. So he would actually, I think recently or a few years ago, he ended up being in Turkey randomly and he went to Gallipoli, which was kind of in Australian culture. We quite revere Gallipoli as a little bit of an important place in World War One history for Australia's contributions to it. And he was walking around and he sent me this video of from Turkey. He sent me this video of where my family had contributed there. He found family names for me in
Wow.
that cemetery there and just sent a video to me saying, "Hey, do you know if this person's related to you?" So like you keep up these relationships with these people, and as time has gone on, people go different ways. I've had opportunities to. The last time I was in Utah, I was visiting for a different type of reunion
Mhm.
of sorts there. And I just so happened to be when Joe Ingles was in town and we messaged each other and we ended up going out and having lunch there. It was like phenomenal. And there have been times when Dante Exum has visited our studios here in my current thing. And as often as we see each other, we acknowledge each other and it's been great. So Brock Modem was probably my favorite, but you end up just creating relationships with all of these people, whether you're a player or whether you're someone on the sidelines.
Yeah, that's awesome. Joe Ingles was one of my favorite players, especially when he was on the Jazz, but I still follow him and it's actually cool. The shout out to the Timberwolves. They had
Yeah,
a start the other day just so his autistic son could see him play for the first time. That was pretty cool.
very cool. It was very, very cool. And I gotta say, like everything that you probably read about Joe Ingles, about who he is as a person, pretty true. Like he's probably like one of those legitimate good people in the world. That's very hard to fault. He was an important part of that particular team that was there, and he has been an important part of many teams that he's been in, whether it's the Jazz or he had a year at my favorite team or the Magic
Hmm.
there, and he's just an all around good person. I think Australia is probably waiting for the day that he comes back and gives us his farewell tour.
Sure.
It makes sense that he'll probably stay in the US as long as he can in the NBA. But I'm sure that the Australian fans are really excited to have him back when he eventually does come back.
Yeah, he was great. I loved him too because I'm like, I can relate to this guy. I mean, he looks like a math teacher. He's got a great dad bod and he's a phenomenal shooter. Check, check, check for me.
All of them, all of the boxes.
Which we had our own team in Australia, Kellyville
We did.
Irish. We had our own
Still
little
going.
dynasty, still going.
We did, still
Um,
going, but it started, at least this version started in Sydney when you were here. You were there in that inaugural season where I think like when we originally put the team in, we put it in a lower division because we weren't sure how we were going to go, right? We thought, oh, there's a few of us here who are a little bit older, so maybe we should go a bit lower. But as it turned out, we were okay in the highest division, and then we just didn't lose that year that you were there.
Undefeated, man.
We were like the Patriots minus the Giants at the end.
Yeah. That was fun. That was, and again, like you said, I huge props to you for being a part of like a glue guy for so many of us in Australia. So with the
Oh
Irish and
man.
church ball group, it's been phenomenal. By the way, that Larry O'Brien trophy in the background, how did that get there?
You know what? It through all these trips that have happened, I've met some pretty fun people. It's hard for me to go into the exact detail of how that got there, but let's just say you meet some really cool people when you're doing the world tour. On that particular trip, the different places that we went to Italy, Finland, France, Lithuania, which I'd never been to before. The particular person who helped me acquire this is actually someone that I met in Spain who is from America and is constantly working on the Larios. So I may have been able to infiltrate that that system there. So,
Amazing.
but that's a fun a good reminder to me. Whenever I see that, I'm actually just reminded of the time where I bumped into this person who was actually the arena that we were in was in Barcelona at the time. That's where we were. And it just so happened to be the same building that the original Dream Team, the greatest team ever, won their gold medal
Dang.
there. So there's like a little bit of history there, and you meet some cool people who have done some cool things, and that's how things like that end up in someone's office.
That's amazing. Yeah, I know you couldn't even find something like that on eBay because the only people that have them are teams nowadays, pretty much.
That's it. That's it.
Sweet. Well, we'll leave it at that. I love it. Um, all right. Well, switching gears, what's something unique about your culture that you're very
Right.
proud of?
Yeah. Well, look, I think here I'm very proud of my Māori culture. Māoris are the native New Zealanders there, for those who aren't sure. Um, but being born and raised in Australia, I'm also proud of Australian culture as well. I think one thing that not a lot of people realize about Australia, that we're quite proud of, well, actually, maybe not so much proud of, but lends itself to the lifestyles that you see people living, is the fact that in Australia, 80% of the people who live here, actually, I think it's like 87% of all Australians live within 50 kilometers of the beach.
Oh, wow.
So when you think about Australia, this big block of land, most of the residents who live here actually live in that perimeter
Mm,
of the country there. And that's why when people see and think about Australian culture and you think ocean and beach and surfer and laid back type stuff, that's a big reason, part of the reason why that is because the outback, as we would call it, or as it would probably get called internationally, is almost as foreign to a lot of Australians as it is to tourists who are coming over here for the first time. Like we just don't get into the middle part of our country very often. It's quite arid. It's very dry, a lot of dirt there. But I mean, I remember in contrast to that time when I took a red-eye flight from Salt Lake City to Orlando, and it was late at night and we were flying out. But for a large part of that trip, anytime I was sitting on the window seat at the time, anytime I would look out and look down, I saw lights. Like
mhm,
as you like, it was occupied there throughout a lot of the Midlands, a lot
mhm.
of the center of America as we were flying from the Midwest over to, basically the bottom east in down there in Florida. I noticed that every time I looked out, there were always lights there. Whereas in Australia, like it doesn't take long to be in that plane and to start seeing just a lot of nothing as you go closer and closer to the middle of things. It really doesn't take that long. And I think that a big part of our culture is driven from the fact that actually like almost 90% of the population is living so close to water that we almost can't avoid it, so to speak. And why would you want to anyways? But because it's so accessible, that's why that particular culture, Australian culture, is so prevalent. But I don't think a lot of people realize that, we love the idea of the outback, but we don't often see it.
Yeah.
We don't often get there. And that culture that we have, just that which is based around, the ocean blue and some of the other things there. It's something that I'm really proud of in terms of like the Australian culture. Like it does its best to get out into nature, which can be really hard to do when you're kind of in these built up countries that are concrete jungles in a lot of places. Whereas, here, that's something that I think people are really proud of
Yeah.
and is part of people's DNA.
For sure. Well, it keeps you grounded, literally keeps you grounded. Like, I remember our first month we lived on Bondi Beach, one of the most iconic beaches in the world, and it was just amazing. But I think Australia has like 27,000 beaches. Like, it would take you your whole life going to a new beach every day to try and go to them all. But the most beautiful beaches on earth, and there's nothing more grounding than just walking in the sand and hearing the ocean, smelling the ocean. It's a good reset. And we
Yeah, no,
really
for sure.
we miss that.
It misses you too. Don't worry about
We
it.
we need to get back soon. Another thing that I really appreciate about your multicultural culture is the first time I ever saw the haka in person was you were actually, I think, part of that, but those are
Mm,
very special. Like, yeah, we see it in sport. It's cool to see the All Blacks and the Wallabies
mm.
play, so you can see the haka. But really, maybe you can talk a little bit about that. But I saw it at a funeral, and it was a very
Mm,
spiritual moment, like very, very powerful. And so I think that's something that your family, is very,
mm.
that's very, that's just you. But like, I really like that.
It is a very special part of the culture there, and I've performed it at a number of different places there. I've done it at funerals, at weddings, at farewells of
Mm,
sorts there, and I think to what you're saying there, the forum in which people will mostly see the haka is mostly in the sporting forum,
yeah.
where it's used as like a respectful challenge. It's never intended as like an intimidating thing there. It's mostly there to acknowledge the opponent and to um, kind of just throw down like it's almost like if you were playing football, just like headbutting your opponent's helmet, like out of respect. It's a way to um, not only welcome someone to the field that you're on, but also to let them know that what's about to happen comes from the bottom of people's goodness hearts. And so there are different versions of a haka that you can do. There will be ones where you're genuinely doing it for legitimate war purposes, where you want the person who's coming over here to know that you are not going to back down, and that you are going to fight to the death to preserve something. And then there would be other hakas where they are done as a cultural handshake of sorts, if that's the way to explain it. It's there to acknowledge someone's life or to celebrate someone's existence or someone's presence. It's often used to wish people good luck if they're traveling there. So it's not just a thing that is done to try and intimidate someone when you're about to play a game of sports. It's a thing that's done to recognize and to honor uh, a person's mana, a person's soul and spirit. And so that is one thing about it that I love as well is that there are multiple purposes for it, but oftentimes the ones that we use and the ones that we see away from the sporting arena are the ones that are intended to bind people closer together. It is a spiritual experience to be able to perform it. But even my wife, who is not Maori, she's Australian, she will feel it too. The same way you did, I think,
Yeah,
is you can kind of feel that energy and feel the love that a person has when they're doing it. So you're right. It is something from my Māori culture side that I'm very proud of as well.
that's great. What's something about Australia or even New Zealand that you wish more people understood? Maybe it's like misunderstood.
Um, well, I think that I kind of semi covered it off when I talked about that beach lifestyle, but I think something that is misunderstood is that Australia is just as busy a country as any other country that has introduced capitalism into it. Like we love the beaches, but we don't always get to enjoy the beaches because our working days are pretty full on. I think Australian culture is portrayed as shrimp on a barbie and g'day mate, and all is well, so to speak. But it's a pretty robust set of personalities that exists here. And I think one thing that people might not understand about Australian culture is that it's actually one of the most multicultural places
Mm,
that you will ever find. There are many different races and many different personalities that will come to Australia from all over the world. I think its geolocation lends itself to being something that a person might want to go to if what they were going for was a little bit of escapism
yeah.
from the rest of the world, because it is kind of so disconnected and so, or at least geographically, so far away from where everything else lives. But it is actually one of the most multicultural places that you will ever find. There's a lot of ads that will have the blonde haired, blue eyed surfer guy, surfer girl there. But Australian culture is actually very mixed,
Mm,
and we have a very rich Greek presence in Australia. We have a very rich European presence in Australia. Um, there's a large Asian community that exists in Australia, as there are, Indian communities and Middle Eastern communities. But one of the things that it took me a little bit of maturity and going through my teenage years to properly realize this, because I kind of grew up on this feels bad saying, I grew up on a lot of hip hop culture
Mm.
when I was younger, where at that time, when I grew up on that, the East Coast, West Coast thing was probably a little bit like these were things of like matters of life and death, that at that particular time. And so I was kind of grew up thinking that that's how most people would, with opposing views would maybe operate, was in that manner. But in Australia, there's a lot of pride that's taken in making sure that that multicultural thing is not only um, something that is important for us to see, but it also helps shape the future of what we want to do as a country. So now, I remember going through a store in one place, I won't say where I was, and it was very clear that a certain origin, ethnicity wasn't really welcomed in that place. And here in Australia, I think one of the things that I found is that it doesn't really happen like that. There's a lot of unity, a lot of harmony that exists between um, personalities and cultures that may have clashed traditionally. And I think Australia does a really good job of fostering that stuff there. But that would be one thing I would say is that I don't think people realize just how multicultural Australia is. And it kind of, you've been here, you've experienced it.
Yeah.
And once you experience it, it's kind of it's like a really healthy thing for our children to see all these different cultures coming together,
Yeah.
and celebrating things together, and kind of working on things together, to make a better future.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. Like I've never met more of a diverse culture than in Sydney. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
it's the
Sydney is
best food in the world, I think too.
that's I hear you. I see it in my workplace a lot too, actually. Like just walk down my hallway for 10 minutes and you'll kind of see what that looks like in the flesh.
Yeah. Now, um, you've been all over the world. You mentioned your basketball tour, several countries there. Where's your favorite place you've ever been and why?
Oh, that's a good question. I think my favorite place that I've ever been to is is a place in Switzerland called Lauterbrunnen.
Mm,
I'll tell you why. A few years ago, my father-in-law passed away about 10 years ago now, I think, and he was a red-blooded Englishman, as English as you get. Very proud of his English roots too, as are his children, as am I of him.
mm,
So we decided because he has since passed away quite a while ago, but his siblings were still around in England, and his extended family were there too. And we felt like it was important. My wife and I felt like it was important that we took our kids back there to connect with his extended family before they too kind of kicked on a little bit, and
yeah.
they were aging, and health was a little bit of a question mark at times, so we thought we better go, and we better go soon. So we took them over there, and while we were over there we thought, you know what, since we're already over here in the UK, let's just take them to some other parts of Europe as well. So like in this one suite we took them to Greece, and then to Italy, and then to France, and then we kind of finished off this kind of quick 1 week sweep through Europe by finishing off in Lauterbrunnen, which is, I guess, you've ever been there before, Joey?
Not to Lauterbrunnen, but to Switzerland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So like everything that a person thinks of when they think of a valley, a town that lives in a valley in Switzerland, that's what Lauterbrunnen is. It's just
Yeah.
this magical place, that is very green in the summer and very white in the winter. It sits at this valley, and I think one of the things that is really special about it, and my wife, who when we went there, it was actually her second trip to Lauterbrunnen, and one of the things that she said was that she'd already done France before, so had I. She had already done Rome before, so had I. But when we went back to Lauterbrunnen, she said that was the one place in that trip that still felt the same and still looked exactly the same then as it did like 15, 20 years earlier when she had traveled to it as a backpacker.
Hmm.
Like it's kind of this place that time hasn't touched. And
Mm.
there aren't very many places like that in today's world where if you go there, you see a really old church where the bells just will play at, different times. And I remember one particular time when we were walking through town, we just so happened to be next to this church while the bells went off, and we just like stood there and listened to them playing for like a good 5 minutes. They were so beautiful to hear. Um, I think it's called Lauterbrunnen because um, I think the translation for that is loud waters, and it's in this valley that just has a lot of waterfalls
Hmm.
coming into it from all over the place. So for its pure escapism and for the ability to connect purely with the person that you're or the people that you're with at that time. In this case, I was there with my kids.
Hmm.
We were totally off the grid without actually being off the grid, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
Like we were in our own world there, and it felt like just this magic place that time had preserved for people who needed a little bit of a respite from the rest of the world. And
Hmm.
that's what we got there. And we purposely put it at the end of our kind of sweep through because we knew everyone was going to be tired from, like Greece into Italy into France. We knew people would be very, very tired. And we just needed a place to lay low for a few days and just regather. And that was just this magical, magical place. And if anyone ever talks to me about Switzerland and what it was actually like, that is always the experience that I'll bring up there.
Nice. I love Switzerland.
So good.
That's great. Jardian, if you could go back 10 years and give yourself one piece of advice, what would you give you?
I think I would probably say to myself 10 years ago, take your health more seriously and your personality less seriously. I think, depending on the people who really know me, probably the people in this house, there would be probably times when I can get a bit serious
Yeah.
about stuff. There's stuff that where my sense of humor was probably this thing that needed to grow a little bit. And I probably could have learned a little bit from just not taking myself so seriously by learning to laugh a little bit about the things that were worthy of laughing at. So I think if I could go back in time, I'd probably say to myself there, hey, that thing that you're worrying about, that thing about your identity that you're like stressing out about, don't. Like it's okay. It's okay to laugh about some of the things that we're not good at. And
Yeah.
it's okay to to just acknowledge that there are some things that we can work on. So I'd take that part of myself a little less seriously if I could go back, but also I would probably take my health a little bit more seriously because I think I took for granted playing sports for so long that the body doesn't always respond, hold up as you get a little bit older the way that it did, when I was younger. I remember rocking up to basketball games like 30 seconds before they would start. No stretching, no nothing, no nutrition. And I'd just get out there on the court and play for like 5 hours straight and I wouldn't have any problems. I wouldn't stretch after or anything like that. But as you get older, I guess it changes a little bit. And, I think in Polynesian culture, we're a little bit more at risk of some of those natural things. It's
Yeah.
important for us to maybe pay a little bit more attention to some of those things. And I kind of didn't. I kind of, just cruised through on the occasional Polynesian diet, which is a lot of Colonel Sanders and at family gatherings and is a lot of it's a lot of really high fatty foods, which are very delicious, but perhaps something that I could have used a little bit more moderation in. So I think if I was to see myself, 10 years ago, I would say, hey, take your health more seriously, but take your personality and all that other stuff a little less seriously.
Yeah.
And that would actually probably have presented a different person. I think I probably would have been this person that I am now, but I would have gotten there a lot faster
Right.
and with a lot more ease if I knew that about that 10 years ago.
That's some sound advice. Who's been a major influence in your life and why?
I mean, many people. I think, I often think about my dad when I think about that question. He passed away many years ago now, 15 years ago, I think. And he passed away when we were just about to have our first child. But I think the reason that he's someone that had a major influence in my life was because I think being the oldest child, I was a little bit more exposed to him than the rest of my siblings, just had a little bit more time with him. But he was a person who actually taught me that the most important thing that we could ever really give anyone was actually our time. That the time of day is something that is amongst the most valuable thing that we give. And I think as a child, he, was not caught up, but he had responsibilities that meant he had to sometimes split time that would otherwise have gone to children and spend that with, other people in our you know, um, church community or other community there, and he would often be out and about there, and I never resented it at all as a child. But I would occasionally wonder why he wouldn't be at some of the places that we were, and I think. And I never felt either that I missed out on anything there because everything that mattered, he was always there too. But
Mhm.
he was the person who said to me that, there's many things that we can give people, but time is one of the most important things that you can give people. And he actually helped me understand the concept and the principle that I hold to today that um, being time poor is a really interesting concept because time itself is one of the very, very few things in this world that everyone actually gets the exact same amount of every single day.
Yeah.
You can be task heavy, but it's impossible to be time poor because everyone gets that same amount of time and how we use it is entirely up to us. But he kind of helped, like once that was reframed to me that way, that people who feel as though they are time poor, it's probably a little bit more to do with the fact that they're actually just really task heavy,
Mhm.
jobs to be done heavy. And once I kind of looked through it from that lens, it helped me understand that a lot of the things that I was committing my time to probably didn't matter. A bag with holes, as they would say. And so I think for that wisdom that he put into me, like it's changed how I think a lot about my life now. I probably that midlife crisis period that people occasionally go through. I felt like may have gone through that a little bit before, and that advice to just always remember the value of time was super helpful to me because and that pushed me through any concerns that I had about getting older or getting into a point of life where it was going to be a bit tricky for me to do certain things. I think that advice that he had given and realizing that I've got just as much time as anyone else when I wake up in the morning and it really comes down to how I'm going to spend it.
Yeah.
um, that has always kept him in my mind, not just because he's my dad, but because of the that lesson that he taught.
Yeah. I really like that. And I really appreciate your time spending with me today. I think that's a good place to end, but a few quick rapid fire questions to seal this off. So, what's something funny or unique about you that nobody knows about or that not many know about?
Not many know about. Well, on that particular tour of the world that I was telling you about when I was doing media for the Olympic teams, I did a lot of filming and a lot of editing, and that would be sent back to Australia and it would be played and used on ESPN as if it was like their own original content.
Yeah.
But because of that, I don't know how this happened, but I found out one day that I had been nominated through that series for a Women in Media Award, solely because these videos came in and the name that was attached to these videos was Jardian. And the person who looked at that, I guess, just assumed that Jardian was a woman, not a
That's
man. So without doing any research on it, I just got put into this category of women in media award. So when I got notified of it, I don't know if you watch Parks and Rec at all, but I felt very much like Ron Swanson on that day, where I think if I had gotten a proper invite to the dinner then, I would have absolutely taken it. And if I had won it, I would have absolutely walked on stage. But say la vie, they found out that I was probably not eligible to win that award. But that's something that people don't know. And I thank my parents every day for a name as ambiguous as mine.
yeah, I like it. We'll call you Jards. That's
Yeah,
awesome. I'm gonna nominate you for another women's category for something coming up. 3-point shot
I'm
for
ready
sure.
for it.
You got
I'm
you.
ready for it.
What's one thing you're really grateful for right now?
The help that I do have. I know it's a work in progress, but the help that we do have right now is something that I'm very grateful for. Also, my children, like that sounds like such a cliched and corny thing to say, but they are the things that really help me recenter a lot of myself when I'm feeling a little bit thing. That they're simultaneously the things that stress me out the most and provide me the most stress relief when I'm at those points of feeling like everything's a bit full on. So I'm grateful for them.
Same. I like that. What's a book or movie you recommend to everybody?
Ooh. I mean, I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan, so that kind of passes as both a book and a movie. Like all of those are going to go well. If you're into your non-fiction stuff, I definitely, uh, and you're into business, I definitely think that a couple of books that changed my life were my working life were probably Never Split the Difference by Andrew Voss, who was an ex FBI negotiation hostage negotiation officer. And then Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke is a really good book about just learning how to visualize life through, value and risk and stuff like that. So if you're into the creative fictional side, definitely go Lord of the Rings. And if you're into that other stuff like that, that's been pretty helpful for me, those books.
Love it. What you prefer, mountains or beach for an escape?
Oh, for instance, so you know what? I think if it's to go away to, I'd probably say mountains. If it's to live on, the beach.
Beach.
For
Yeah.
sure. Like I think I'd probably much prefer living near the water. But I mean, I recently had my birthday. It was a big birthday. And to get away, my wife and I, we went up to the mountains for a couple of days and we just planned on doing hiking because we quite like hiking. And the weather did not participate. The weather was not conducive to doing that. But the mountains, we love the mountains too. So I guess it depends. Like if we're holidaying, send us mountains. If we're like trying to live somewhere, send us beach.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time, mate, and our friendship. And I just think the world of you. So, how can people
Likewise.
connect with you? How can people find you and follow you?
Well, because of said name problem that I had before, it's not actually hard for me to ever get a name. So if you want to find me on LinkedIn, it's basically the LinkedIn / Jardian. And same with um, any of the other socials that are out there. It is one of the blessings of having a name that will occasionally get you mixed up for being, eligible for a Women in Media award, is that I don't have to fight people to get the username. So any one of those, you can find me there, and I'm always happy to chat.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, I appreciate this. Thank you very much, and we will talk soon.
All right. Thanks, my man.
Take care.